back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about semi-hydro for Vanda orchids. So I've been growing Vandas for about 3 years, and when I started growing Vandas, I started transitioning them into semi-hydro. So I transitioned a lot of my collection to semi-hydro when I started getting more orchids because I wanted the water to be more manageable. So I thought I could transition everything over to semi-hydro. I thought it would work well. Some of my orchids bloomed really well, including some of the Vandas. I'm talking about my Neofinetia falcata types. They were blooming, they were growing well for a while, and then that changed. So I'm about to show you my Vanda collection in semi-hydro. Some I've had to take out of semi-hydro, and I'm going to share my thoughts. So as I mentioned early on, I thought I could transition things into the grow system and that everything would be okay, but that's not the case. So I will give you a closer look at my Vandas, show you how they're doing now, my general thoughts, and what I'm going to do in the future. So let's take a closer look. So the first Vanda that I want to show you is my Vanda vietnamica. I got this 2 years ago from Gold Country Orchids, and I repotted it and put it right in this pot. So it's got Leca. I think it has a little bit of lava rock as well, but it is in an always moist semi-hydro setup in a self-watering pot. You can't really see the roots anymore because this is covered in algae, but this one seemed to have done well in semi-hydro so far. The roots are alive. The only issue is the aerial roots that come out on top. They obviously can't reach the reservoir, and that's okay, but it's been growing quite tall. I did lose a couple of leaves, like right here. This one just fell off. It dried up, but it's starting to grow again from the top. So I did have a little rot in these leaves here. Otherwise, it is doing well. It's bloomed several times. It blooms a lot, actually. And this is quite a small Vanda, so this one's doing well. I think I'm going to transition it to a traditional setup, though, because I feel like I don't feel confident about the setup, to be honest. I'm going to show you a couple more Vandas where things are going all right, but the last Vanda I'm going to show you, you'll see why I want to move to a traditional setup. But so far, this one is doing well. This one's the Vanda vietnamica. It is a species orchid, and so far, this one is okay. This next one is another orchid. I actually bought it along with the Vanda vietnamica. This one is the Renanthera Sunrise Persong. This came from Gold Country Orchids, and it is also in semi-hydro. I believe I potted these up together, and it's growing roots, it's growing vegetatively. It hasn't bloomed for me at all. I hope it blooms soon because I have had it for 2 years. I mean, it doesn't look the best. It's certainly getting enough light, it's getting enough nutrients, but I'm a little concerned because when I take the pot out, there's just so much give. I don't think that the roots in here are alive anymore. So I think I'm going to repot this very soon because I'm not confident that these roots here are doing that great. But it's like, I would say it's just like kind of surviving. It doesn't look so terrible, but it's not blooming. I wouldn't say it's thriving. It's doing okay. The leaves are growing out larger. There's a new leaf coming in the middle. So, I mean, there might be a few roots in there that are viable, but I don't know. I'm not convinced with this one. This has been in the setup for 2 years. I remember I got this right before the holiday of 2020. So it came in the mail maybe on the 24th of December. I'll link the repot video for this, or the unboxing rather, down below. If I have a recording of the repotting video, I will link it as well. But I'm not convinced. So I think I'm going to move this to an organic setup. It's had 2 years here. And I just don't like that there's so much give in the pot. You would think that it would fill the pot, and if it were firm, I would know that the roots were alive in there, but I think there's a lot of dead roots there. Let me show you another one. The next one I will say is doing a lot better. Okay, this next one is doing so much better. This one's the Darwinara Rainbow Stars. I bought it along with the other 2 Vandas from Gold Country Orchids, holiday of 2020. So it's been in this setup for 2 years, and just check out the roots. They're like all over the place. So this has nice aerial roots. It's got great roots inside of the pot. It's actually pretty firm in this pot. So there are viable roots in here. Like there's parts of the pot with no give at all. So I know that the roots are alive in here. But some of them have died that hit the water. That's inevitable. But I know that there's viable roots here. It's grown really nicely. It's got multiple fans that have come out, especially at the base. Like there's more coming out through here. So, I mean, I think this one's going to be okay. It's getting lots of light. You can see a lot of the anthocyanin on the leaves. It's nice and purple. This is really close to my lights. And what I like is that the leaves are growing at a decent size. Like the bottom leaves are much longer. Then I transitioned it to semi-hydro, and then it was a little short. Now they're getting longer again. So, I mean, ideally you want to see the leaves about the same length. It did stall a bit, but it's coming back. So I don't think it's horrible. It did come from a greenhouse. So sometimes there is a shock when you repot. So this I did not like. So like you see how it's long here, then shortened. This is around when I got it, but now it's getting longer again. So, I mean, the roots are good. I think it could be better. It's never bloomed for me. I know other folks that have this orchid. Michael McCarthy, I'm talking to you. You guys have not been able to bloom this. Darwinara Rainbow Charm. But you've had it grow on you, and you've had multiple fans. So let me know down in the comments if anyone has this orchid, if you've been able to get this to bloom. But I think I'm going to repot this in the spring in bark and a little moss and let it get wet dry cycles again. This one is doing so much better than the others. It's been in here for 2 years. I haven't killed it yet. But before we get to my last orchid that I'm going to show you, I do want to say that I got a couple of Neofinetia falcata seedlings that I transitioned to semi-hydro over the spring. And they died within a couple of months. They were small seedlings. I thought the roots would grow out and everything would work out well, and they died rather quickly. So that's when I started thinking, maybe this is not for all these orchids anyway. So I've been monitoring them. This one's fine. But let me show you my Neofinetia falcata, which is the last orchid. So I'm not going to lie, I feel pretty badly about this one. This is my Neofinetia falcata, the Hisui, falcata by Hisui. I got this from Hauserman Orchids over 2 years ago. And bummer, this was the first orchid I transitioned to semi-hydro. That was a Vanda. And it did really well for a long time. So it bloomed on me, then it re-bloomed. It must have bloomed maybe 5 times in a row in semi-hydro. So I thought, okay, this is a very good viable grow method for the Vanda types, especially the Neofinetia falcata types. Now, when I transitioned some seedlings into semi-hydro that were Neofinetia falcata and they died, I was rethinking that. And I noticed that one of the fans on my original orchid died back. I'm going to show you what it looked like before, but you'll notice it had multiple fans before. And then I noticed one fan started dying off. Then another fan started dying off. And then I was just like, oh no. And then I got kind of busy. I couldn't really repot. And then I was flushing my collection, and I noticed that my plant was wobbly. So I just grabbed it and I pulled it out just to realize that all of the roots in the pot had died except for like 2. So there were 2 new growing root tips on this. I had to immediately repot it. I decided to put it into moss. This is all I had available. I'm not using the self-watering feature. It was just the perfect size, so I will not be using that for now. So it's just in moss. I water it, let it dry, and then I water it again. So I'm hoping that it'll push out new roots and come back to its full glory. I've obviously set this back a lot, but this one deceived me because it did well in the beginning. It bloomed, like I said, maybe 5 times. So I thought that meant that this was a good grow system. But the old roots seem to have survived in the Leca. What I've noticed is that new roots that came down would die off. So sometimes even long term, you really don't know the effect. Like even after a year, this was still doing great. It was still blooming, but over 2 years later, that's when I realized like, oh no, like the fans started dying off. The new roots were not really going in. The old root system adapted, which was interesting, right? So it survived, but then the new roots just wouldn't take to the Leca, which was very interesting. So my final thoughts on this are that Vandas are a little trickier. When you get the big Vandas, obviously those need more airy mix, maybe bark. A lot of them are grown bare root. That I understand. It's a lot of these that are smaller that I grow, the Neofinetia falcata types and their hybrids I thought would work well in semi-hydro, but now I'm questioning it because in the long run, after a year, I thought it was okay. But once a root system dies off, when you get the new root system and it doesn't take, that's when I started questioning it. And then when I saw fans die off, I realized, okay, maybe this isn't the best grow method for me anyway in my environment in New York City. So I'm going to move all these guys this spring or sooner if I can into moss and bark. So those other two that I showed you, I'm going to move over. But these were the results with my Vandas. And this is for, many of these were over 2 years in the setup. So this is the very long term in the pots. They start off fine, even a year later, guys. So I just wanted to give you some continuity and share how they did. But this was really disappointing for me. So this is what my Neofinetia looks like now. And I hope it does okay. And I will keep you updated. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below if you've grown any Vandas in semi-hydro, if it worked out for you. I've seen some growers grow Vandas with success in semi-hydro, but I think the big factor here is time. So it could start off well in semi-hydro, even for over a year, but over time as the new root system comes in, I tend to think that some of them can decline, so let me know your thoughts. I will continue to update you guys on how these Vandas are doing, but I think moving forward I'm going to repot them into a more traditional setup because I think they'll do better that way and they can get their wet-dry cycles and I won't have to worry about these dying on me. It's not like where I grow my cattleyas where all of them tend to act similarly, maybe with the exception of a few species. Vandas are a hit or miss, so I think I'm just gonna stop playing around with them and I will move them into more moss and bark, make sure they dry out, and so on and so forth. I do love my Neofinetia falcatas, now known as Vanda falcata, but the big Vandas are obviously going to be in a traditional setup. Those were never really suitable for semi-hydro, but some of the smaller Vandas I saw would work in the setup, so that's why I moved them over, but in the long term it just doesn't seem to work very well. So this spring, the orchids that I do have that are Vandas in semi-hydro, I'm going to move them over to a traditional setup. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful. If you liked it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye everyone.